Well, welcome to the Botanical Medicine Study Course with me, your host and instructor for all things botanical medicine. And my name is Stephanie Georgieff. At the time of the posting of this video, we're almost at the end of Maternal Health Month, which comes around every May. Now, for this month of May, we've been exploring several herbs, and let me tell you, there are many, many plants which are helpful for maternal health. And this has been a very short list indeed for our explorations. But for this week's Herb of the Week, it's going to be another one of those botanical medicines that sits on the fence between nutrition, food, and medicine. So for this week's Herb of the Week, we're going to be exploring alfalfa. Now, when I was young, so very long ago, the availability of nutritional supplements was rather limited. We only had one-a-day vitamins, and that was about it. And oh, yes, the Flintstones chewables for kids. My aunt, who was a nurse, and this was way back in the late 1960s and early 1970s, got our whole family going to the chiropractor and trying Shaklee vitamins and house products. Back then, Shaklee had one of the only alfalfa supplements that I was aware of. And again, I wasn't out shopping because I was a school-age child at this time. But according to my aunt, alfalfa was a miracle drug. Most of us are aware of alfalfa sprouts, which seem to go in and out of vogue in terms of healthy nutrition. Back when I was young, that was all the rage. And if one raises livestock, alfalfa is quite popular for cows, goats, sheep, pigs, and rabbits in terms of feed. Now, this is a word I've never seen used in anything like supplements and that doesn't mean it doesn't mean a whole lot. It just means I haven't seen it, but it's medicago sativa. And, but I'm just going to say alfalfa from here on out. And it's really a beautiful plant. It's a perennial flowering plant of legume family of Fabaceae, which is also known as the pea or the bean family. And it's a really important forage crop in many countries around the world, specifically, as I said, for livestock production, but it's also really good for soil health. And it's used for grazing, it's used as hay, as green manure, and as a cover crop when fields are laying fallow for a year. They usually plant this on it because it is really healing for the soil. Now, the name alfalfa is used in North America, and the name lucerne is more commonly used in the United Kingdom, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. And it's interesting, the name lucerne is a very prized dairy company in Southern California. And I wonder if that's why they chose the name. I just think that's interesting. Now, alfalfa normally lives anywhere from 4 to 8 years, but it can live more than 20 years. And it just depends on the variety you're choosing or the climate. And the plant can get quite tall. It can get up to 1 meter or about a yard, but the root system is pretty incredible. It can grow almost 15 meters deep or about 50 feet deep to reach groundwater. So, wow. And the typical root system is usually anywhere from 7 to 10 feet. So if you want to remove this from your soil, you need like massive tractor things digging up till you reach, bedrock. Owning to this amazing root system, it really helps improve soil nitrogen fertility. And a very important thing is that it protects for soil erosion. So if you're living on a hillside, you might want to just grow alfalfa, first of all, for the pretty flowers and the pollinators that will come, but also the fact that it'll keep your house from sliding down the hill. Now, alfalfa is widely grown throughout the world as feeding for mostly cattle, and it's harvested as hay. Um, but it's really has a high feeding value of all of the common hay crops, and that's why it's grown. It's used less frequently as pasture, but I think that would be a great thing for pasture. And you can see on this wonderful map from Wikipedia Commons, um, you can see where it's grown, and usually that's where there's a lot of livestock production as well. Um, it is the highest yielding of all forage plants. It's very high nutritional, so it's basically you get the most bang for your buck. And it's primarily grown for dairy cattle, but it's also wonderful for beef cattle, horses, sheep, goats, and rabbits. And according to people who do all the data work, apparently my home state of California grows the most in uh, North America. But all I can do is quote the sources. Now, the medicinal actions of alfalfa, it's really high in many nutrients. So it's very nourishing. But it also does other things besides have high levels of vitamins and minerals. It's an anti-inflammatory. It helps regulate blood sugar. So if you tend to have high blood sugar, this is a wonderful plant to incorporate in your life. And because it's anti-inflammatory, that also means that it helps relieve allergy symptoms, makes you less likely to have them. And it's a very powerful plant to help lower cholesterol. Some herbalists say that it has antibiotic properties. And it's also really interesting. There's some fascinating research on how pharmaceutical companies are isolating some of the constituents of alfalfa for use in thyroid medication. Now, I can't say that this is good herb for thyroid issues, but because it's anti-inflammatory, most thyroid conditions are autoimmune. So anything that helps reduce inflammation will definitely help that situation. Now, here's a wonderful slide from a really interesting company called SlideShare. So this is hats off to SlideShare. And these are the chemical constituents of alfalfa. You didn't think you were eating that in your sprouts on avocado sandwich, did you? Now, because this plant is used so much in livestock production, it is quite well studied. And this is an image from, as I said, the resource called SlideShare. I couldn't possibly put all these chemicals in one slide. But as you can see, wow, there's just a lot in there. And you can see why it's so good and nutritious, as well as having so many medicinal actions from the constituents in this incredible plant. Now, alfalfa and pregnancy, it's, as I said, it's really high in vitamins and minerals, which are beneficial to mothers and babies during pregnancy. It's very high in calcium, iron, potassium, magnesium, vitamins E, C, and K. And the two that are super important for pregnancy is K, because this helps facilitate blood clotting. Um, and so it's a really good herb and food to use to prepare for birth. Um, and mainly in the olden days, women used to bleed to death after they gave birth. And if you have enough K in your system, your blood clots quicker and you're less likely to do that. Um, Alfalfa helps ease morning sickness. It also increases milk production in nursing moms. It's very high in iron, and it really helps maintain and actually increase iron levels during pregnancy. For those of you who are getting regular prenatal care, every time you go see your midwife or your obstetrician, they're always taking blood and urine. And the two things they're very hawkish about are iron levels in your blood, and if you have too much sugar in your blood and your urine, because they don't want you to get gestational diabetes. But also we need enough iron in our bloods when we're pregnant. So we're not tired, and you're also oxygenating properly, both for you and the growth of your baby. So some women say their iron levels were really horrible during their first pregnancy. The second pregnancy, they're doing alfalfa and their iron levels are off the charts. So it's just a good nourishing herb to include in your pregnancy regime. And again, it helps to prevent postpartum bleeding. Now, make sure you read your labels on your supplements. It's the best way to take this is through tea, mainly because teas are liquid and they're just easier to digest and it gets into your system quicker. If you're taking capsules, you have to digest them, and sometimes your digestion isn't all that great when you're pregnant, et cetera, et cetera. So teas seem to be really good. But if you're taking capsules, make sure that it's just alfalfa and not full of fillers. Read the labels. Usually midwives and obstetricians have good products to recommend. If you want to pass on the vitamin K in alfalfa to your infant, you make sure to start taking it no later than 34 weeks, which is pretty far along in the pregnancy. But I suggest taking it during your entire pregnancy. But if you're not wanting to do that for whatever reason, but you want to use it both to benefit your child as well as yourself, it's good to start it at least at 34 weeks. Now, Susan Weed, prolific herbal writer and herbalist, she has this wonderful herbal method for pregnant women. And she says to put an ounce of dried alfalfa in 1 quart of water and leave it in a sealed jar, particularly in the sun, and let it steep for about a minimum of 4 hours. Just getting all of that stuff out of there. And you can drink to your heart's content, but it's suggested a minimum of 2 cups per day. Now, some women like to mix alfalfa tea with things like mint and red raspberry leaf. And again, that's up to your personal taste and your needs. Now, to sprout or not to sprout during pregnancy, and all sources say no. And they're pretty much, it's uniform to any kind of sprout, bean sprout, clover sprout, lentil sprout, whatever you're talking about. Now, this is kind of a conundrum because sprouting is just one way to really unlock incredible nutrients in certain foods. And they say if you are going to eat sprouts, then cook any sprout. Doesn't matter what it is, cook them thoroughly after rinsing thoroughly. And that kind of defeats the whole purpose of sprouting. So I would not recommend purchasing sprouts from a market, like in a package. It's better to grow them yourself with filtered water and then cook them. The big issue, which is a huge issue, is Salmonella and E. coli, which come from contaminated water sources. Now, mass producing food of any kind is a risk no matter how careful and clean the facility is, which means why making anything you eat yourself is the best course of action. It's always the best course of action for anything. If you don't want sugar, salt, chemicals, all kinds of stuff in your food, make it yourself, grow it yourself if you possibly can, is the best idea. Now, I have a link in the program notes on food safety for pregnant women. And again, if you look at the list, all the concerns are results of humans screwing up the environment with pollution. So like fish has a lot of mercury in it because of we've polluted the world's waters, and large scale industrial food production. So it's not a good idea to do sprouts when you're pregnant. For the rest of us, it's really a great way to get in alfalfa sprouts, but not if you're pregnant. And but there are other ways to get alfalfa in your diet. Now, one of the most popular, and I say delicious ways of getting alfalfa into your body, obviously, is through sprouting, and there's no lack of information on how to do that in the internet and through books. If you buy a sprouting jar, there's directions on the side of that. So I'm not going to bore you with information on that. But if you want to grow it in the ground, this is a great plant for your standing beds when they're resting for any season. And if you have a lot of land and you don't know what to do with it, this is a good thing to do. So it's usually grown in large fields, mainly for animal consumption. It's just I think it's a beautiful plant, and I love the smell of fresh alfalfa. I think it's really a delightful smell. Now, there's a channel I highly recommend. It's called the Epic Gardening Channel, and their website is absolutely fantastic. And I'm putting a link in the program notes on their incredible article on growing alfalfa in the garden. I could not do it better, and they actually know what they're doing because I've never done this. But after reading this article, when I do get some land, I can tell you my goats are going to be thrilled with what I plan to do with that part of the property. Now, one of the most popular and I would say delicious ways of getting alfalfa into your body is sprouts. I'm a child of the 1970s, which was this interesting decade after the turbulent 60s, and everyone essentially went back inside after anti-war protests, etc. And they started meditating and they ate grape nuts and alfalfa sprouts. Now, sprouts were everywhere and nobody got sick and died. I don't ever remember that. And I always watched the news with my parents, and that was never on the news. So do with this what you want. But I digress. If you're pregnant and nursing, the best way to take alfalfa is through teas. And it seems that 2 cups of tea per day does quite a bit for pregnant moms. You can get them in bags or bulk and make it from there. There are also tinctures. Obviously, if you're pregnant, you don't want an alcohol tincture, you want a glycerin or vinegar tincture. And there's all sorts of capsules available. And obviously, the Shaklee product is wonderful. Just make sure it's just alfalfa and not other things. And for dosages, when you're pregnant, ask your midwife or obstetrician the best dosage for your personal needs. So, however you wish to incorporate alfalfa into your life, in your garden, on your sandwich, if you're not pregnant, in teas, supplements, this nutrient is a rich gift from nature and is a delight for both human and beasts. This is Stephanie Georgia saying thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me. Make sure to check out the program notes. There are links there for all sorts of interesting information. And until next time, be well.